Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. So I'm here with the fourth update for my palette of the month, and for this series I'm just using a different eyeshadow palette every month, and then I'm doing videos once a month where I talk about the eyeshadow palette that I used in the past month and I introduce the palette that I'll be using for the next month. So for this update, I'll be talking about the palette that I used in April, which was the Urban Decay Naked 3 palette. I'm sure everyone knows what this palette looks like, but here's what mine looks like. So this is a palette that I do like, but I haven't gotten a ton of use out of. Especially last year, I was really focused on the original Naked palette, the Naked 2 palette. So this one I only was able to use a handful of times. So it was nice to be able to use the palette for a whole month. I think it has some really pretty shades, and I feel like it's a really pretty palette for spring, so I did really enjoy using this. So I'll just go shade by shade and kind of talk about how I used them. So to start off with is Strange. It's this kind of cream, like satin matte shade. I did use this shade as a brow bone highlight. It was a shade I used every day. I don't think I used the shade for anything but a brow bone highlight. But it was a very nice shade to have. I do think it's a little different than like a typical brow bone highlight. I think the Strange name kind of works for this one, but I did really enjoy using that. The next shade is definitely a much more glittery shade. It's Dust. It's this sort of rosy, champagne-y sort of shade. This one is very glittery. It's very pretty in the pan. I found that it was a little hard to work with. You definitely get glitter fallout with it. So it wasn't a shade that I'd want to wear like to work or anything, because I did feel like it was a little bit glittery for work. But this was kind of pretty. I did like to pair it with some other shades, maybe like Limit, like in the crease, and then this like all over the lid with Strange was one of the looks I did. I thought was pretty. A little harder to work with. It was hard to kind of build up the sort of like metallic glittery color. I felt like it would be better sort of foiled. So I did try using, I don't have MAC Fix Plus to like foil an eyeshadow, but I did try using, I have the Smashbox Primer Water. I tried that. I don't know how successful that was, but I do feel it would be a shade that would be better used maybe wet to get more intensity with the shade, because like on its own, just packing it on the lid, I felt like it lacked a little bit of the intensity. So that's that shade. The next one is one I did use quite a bit. It's Burnout. So it's just a sort of softer, like rose, like more rosy shade. It's more of a shimmery shade than a glitter. So this is one that I did use like for work. I would use this one and then Limit like as all over the lid shades with Strange for work. Those were the ones I would use the most often. I think I also used Liar, which is over here, as sort of everyday sort of shade. But I think this was one of my most frequently used, besides Strange, sort of all over the lid shades. I found that one is just easy to wear. It's a soft look. It gives you a little bit of that kind of rosy tone, but it's not too intense. So I did really like that. Next is Limit, which is sort of a rose gold matte. This palette had 3 mattes, the Strange, a Limit, and the Nooner. So, as I said before, Limit is something I would wear all over the lid for just a quick sort of everyday look. And I would also use this as a crease color. So I did get some good use out of Limit. It was really pretty as a crease color. I felt like it paired really well with a lot of these other shades. The next shade is another sort of glittery shade. This is Buzz. So this is sort of a more amped up like rose gold shade. It's not something I would really wear every day because it did have that glitter, and I just don't really want to wear like glitter for work shades. But this one is really pretty. This is a pretty all over the lid shade. I did really enjoy this. The next one is Trick. Trick is a copper, and in the pan it looks a little more copper, but on the lid it gives a more of a rosy sort of copper. It's really, really pretty. I feel like some of these shades in this pan, they don't really look rose gold, but on the eye it gives more of a rose gold tone, and this one is really pretty. Again, it does have that glitter, but I thought it was something kind of different for this palette, and I really enjoyed this shade. I did a few looks with this, so that was one of my favorites. Then Nooner, the other matte shade. This one I feel like I used all over the lid, but and as a crease shade, but between the two like matte sort of crease shades, I would definitely go more with Limit, just for me personally. Even if I was using darker shades, I did prefer using Limit as a crease color over Nooner, but I did get some use out of Nooner. Then the next three shades, I feel in the pan they all look sort of similar, but swatched out they do look a little different. So there's Liar, Factory, and then Mugshot. And Liar is a little bit more, I think Liar and Mugshot are a little bit more metallic. They have a little bit more punch to them, a little bit more vibrant, where Factory is a little softer. Of the three, I use Liar the most often. This is one that I would wear, to work if I was wanting to do something a little bit deeper, a little more of a medium shade. I would go with Liar. I did use this one quite a bit. Factory is a little bit more faint. I used this in a few looks, but it wasn't one that I was gravitating to that much. And then Mugshot, if I wanted to do something a little bit more dark, it's kind of a medium, dark, deep shade, so I did really like that one as well. And then the last two shades in the palette, the two darker shades, I don't really gravitate towards darker shades. Something like Mugshot would be kind of the darkest I'd go. Something that's not super, super deep. But these ones I feel like I used in like one look. I feel like on me, sort of really dark shades sort of can look muddy, so they're not my absolute favorite, but with my palette of the month, I do try to use all the shades. So there's Dark Side, which is a more kind of dark, kind of taupey shade. And then Blackheart, which is like a black, but it has like a rose gold glitter in it, which I do appreciate that it's not just the standard like matte black. It's something a little bit different, but it was really pretty swatched, but I didn't find a way to really use it on the eye that well. So those two shades, I could take them or leave them, but yeah, that is the palette. I would say my favorite shades would be, let's think, Limit, well, I have my like favorite shades and then my like most practical shades. I think my favorite shades, just in terms of how they looked on the eye, were Buzz, this like glittery rose gold shade, Trick, this coppery pink glittery shade, was just kind of different in this palette, and then Liar and Mugshot. I really like those shades. And then my most sort of practical shades were Strange, which I could use as my brow bone highlight, and Limit, which was a good sort of crease shade. But overall, I did really enjoy this palette. I thought it was fun to use. I just really like Palette of the Month because it really forces me to use all the shades and experiment with different shades. And sometimes you find stuff that you don't really like with shades, and sometimes you find stuff you really like, but it really helps you discover like what type of eyeshadows you really like. So that was the Naked 3 palette. And then now I'll move on to talking about the palette that I'll be using for May. And this palette is definitely more outside of my comfort zone. If you saw it was like my spring makeup bag, I did mention that I would be using this palette. But this is the Urban Decay Vice 2 palette. And this palette I got recently from a friend. We did like this makeup swap where all my friends got stuff they were like decluttering, and we kind of traded stuff. And my friend had two of these palettes. This one of the shades had broken, but she had another palette, the same palette, so she was decluttering this one. So it's kind of hard to show. It is a larger palette. So this is the shade Radar, which is broken, but the rest of the shades are intact. And yeah, I thought this would be a fun one to use. It's definitely outside of my comfort zone, as I said. I don't have a lot of super colorful palettes. I think this one's going to be a little bit more challenging. But I am excited to play around with it. I did use this yesterday and then today. So yesterday I did a more purple look with like Voodoo and Coax. So like this, I'm trying to like share the palette without the mirror, but it's like kind of awkward. But yeah, Voodoo and then Coax, this like sort of more pinky purple shade. And then I had Toxic, this more like salmon-y color in the crease. And then today I used Ambush, just really pretty, like shimmer, let's see, how would I describe it? Like a more coppery, shimmery shade, like all over the lid, and then I put Stash, which is more of a shimmery green on the lower lash line, and then Rewind in the crease. So just kind of having fun with this palette. This palette does have 20 shades with the one that's broken. I have one that has 19. So I am going to try to use all the shades. With this palette, I definitely will have to be a little bit more creative. I'll definitely have to use multiple shades in a look to be able to use all the shades. Hopefully I'll be able to get through all the shades. One of the challenges with this palette is there's not a lot of like work safe colors. I don't really feel comfortable wearing a lot of color or really, you know, to work. So I feel like there's a few work shades. I feel like this bottom row, like maybe these 3 would be like work safe looks. But yeah, I'll have to kind of definitely be a little bit more creative, mix some colors together, use different colors and looks to be able to use all of this, but I think it will be fun to use and experiment around with. Along with that palette, I'm going to pair it with the Urban Decay Naked 2 Basics palette. This is a palette that I like to pair with palettes that might lack some of the basic type of shades. So this palette doesn't really have a brow bone highlight. It does have some stuff you can use as crease colors, but if I want to have something a little bit more like neutral, I can go for this palette. I just think this is a really good like standard palette to have, and of course I've used this one if I want to just do a quick like work look. So I will pair this palette with the Vice 2 as well. So that is everything. I hope you enjoyed the video, and definitely if you're interested in my experience with the Vice 2, look out for my update next month. I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye!